What's up, Ocean? You got Matt here, and welcome to a Twitter discussion on the most underrated Pokemon in Sword and Shield. It's been out for 3 years now, and in like a week's time, we are going to be getting Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and I'm super excited. If you guys are too, make sure to let me know which of the announced Pokemon you are most excited for down in the comments below, as well as go ahead and answer the question: what are some of the most underrated Pokemon in Pokemon Sword and Shield for the past 3 years? Let's go ahead and jump on into it. As always, guys, let's see if you can like the video. We're aiming for 50 likes on today's video, and if you are enjoying the daily content, let me know as well. Let's go ahead and jump on into it. So starting off, the questions. I have Barraskewda on my screen here. Ignore Barraskewda. I think Barraskewda is pretty much overrated, even though it's not really used right now, but that's something else. Either way, we're gonna go ahead and jump into. We have Owen OG Albina who mentioned his Pokemon for the underrated tier list rather. Starting off with Blaziken. Blaziken honestly is super dope. Having great speed at base 80 is honestly solid overall. It's below average speed, but the fact that it has 120 base attack and 110 base special attack is really nice. It has really good coverage options on both the fighting and the fire side, as well as now it gets access to U-turn, which is super cool. It gets access to Brave Bird as well for ways to break through Pokemon that it would, Pokemon like, oh my god, I'm blanking already. It's not a good sign. I'm like opposing fighting type Pokemon without going for something like close combat or Flare Blitz. It gets access to Defog as well, and obviously having Earthquake is nice, and knockoff support really good as well. It's just gained a lot of support over the past 3 years with the release of it in Scarlet and in Sword and Shield, and because of the fact that it has such an amazing attack and special attack stat, it's able to be a really good wall breaker on both ends. And of course, obviously Speed Boost Blaziken is much more busted than Blaziken. Then there's Salamence. Obviously, Owen would say Salamence. Salamence is like one of his favorite Pokemon of all time. It's his mascot after all. Having access to Intimidate, having access to Moxie is great, so it can do a bit of both, whether it's a defensive wall Pokemon with the Intimidate and Wish or Roost, and having access to Moxie so it can sweep like a Scarf or a Dragon Dance is really cool as well. Having access to a Scale Shot in this generation. No, it doesn't get Scale Shot. I thought it did. Oh my god. So it's actually not as good as I thought it was going to be. Well, either way, Dragon Dance, Salamence is still absolutely insane. Nonetheless, having access to a ton of great coverage options on the flying stab with dual wing beat now, actually getting physical flying stab that is not fly is really nice. Still having Earthquake, fire coverage, having access to water coverage with Hydro Pump as well. Having access to your dragon moves obviously is really strong. And like I said before, it can be a really good support Pokemon with the Wish, with something like the Roost, whereas Roost, there it is, and of course Tailwind as well, all have their utilities. And its stat distribution is just fantastic. It's a pseudo-legendary Pokemon, of course it's going to have good stats. And then there's Beware. Beware is solid overall. I like what Beware does because as a Pokemon, its stats are a little misleading because it only has base 80 defense, but because of Fluffy, it takes half damage from contact moves. And there's a lot of contact moves. Majority of them are physical. So having access to something like Fluffy just protects you there. Obviously, you're going to be weaker to fire types, but you can build around that really easily on your team. So I like Beware. Obviously, its speed is kind of lacking at base 60. Same thing with its special defense. However, it's able to take so many hits because of its massive HP at 120. And it's got a really good attack at 125 with great coverage options. A ton of punches like the Ice Punch, Thunder Punch, Drain Punch, etc. A lot of different moves, which is really nice. And of course, it gets access to a ton of really good normal stabs, including Body Slam against Double Edge as well, and a way to hit through Ghost types through Darkest Lair, which is a fantastic option as well. One of the best things as well that it gets is access to where is it? I know it gets access to Bulk Up, right? There we go. Bulk Up on this Pokemon is absolutely deadly. Really one of the best that you can run is a Bulk Up Drain Punch Beware because it is so hard to break down if your opponent has a lot of physical threats that are not fire types. Next up, we'll take a look at Badass Frost. That's who said he's going to throw out Comfy, Thwacky, and regular Slowking. And he's saying that it's priced lower than Slowbro and regular Slowbro and Glowking, which is true. I personally prefer both Slowbro and both Galar Slowking over regular Slowking. However, Galar Slowking, or regular Slowking rather, Slowking, there we go, is insanely good. One of the things I guess that the Galar counterpart doesn't get, which I always wish it did, is Dragon Tail. Dragon Tail is such a phenomenal move, especially with a Pokemon like this that is most of the time going to be running a lot of special defense or physical defense, and that way it can kind of be treated a bit as setup fodder. So having Dragon Tail to phase that out is really nice. Having Regenerator obviously is one of the reasons why it's so good, but having a great typing of Water and Psychic, having the ability to be just so bulky on both the physical and the special side is fantastic, and even taking neutral attacks. If you're running AV Slowking, you're able to just eat hits for days and days and days and recover it all back with regen. So AV Slowking is one of my absolute favorite Pokemon to have access to, and I do think it is definitely underrated. It's got great coverage options, it's got Teleport still, it's got Slack Off, it's got access to Thunder Wave. There's a lot going for it, and I do think that it definitely belongs in an underrated tier. Then there is going to be Comfy. Comfy, I love me some Comfy. Having Comfy is just really nice because it's a way to really prevent you from losing to like powerful dark types or powerful dragon types or powerful fighting types because you have always priority Draining Kiss. Priority Draining Kiss is really nice on a Pokemon that has really solid base special attack at 82 with something like a Pixie Plate is a really common set to run. And the fact this priority is really nice. So you have a way where you're almost never going to just auto lose to a Dragon Dance Pokemon like Dragapult or like a Salamence or whatever it's going to be. I think that's a really big advantage here. You also have priority Giga Drain, which is good. The one thing I wish it got was priority Leech Seed. Unfortunately, the Triage ability does not affect Leech Seed, which kind of sucks, but it's still really good. My favorite set to run on Comfey is actually going to be the Key Berry. Key Berry, the way it works is you get hit by a physical attack, it boosts your defense by 1 stage. And then you get your Calm Mind up as well. You get your Leech Seed, you're able to take so many different hits from so many different things. Get your recovery with Leech Seed, get your recovery with Draining Kiss, get your boost with Calm Mind, and then you click sub, protect, what do you gotta do, and you are gonna live forever. Really, really cool Pokemon on the Comfey, that is definitely for sure. And then Thwackey. Thwackey, I understand the appeal for it. I like the fact that people like that it gets Grassy Surge. However, it's just, it doesn't hit hard enough. It's only got 85 base attack, and yes, while Comfey at 82 special attack, I think that the fact that you're relying on a Pokemon and an NFV doesn't have a great stat distribution, and while its typing is fine, it's not great. Grass is one of the worst typings there is. Fairy is definitely a lot better. You can get away without having a Grass type on your roster. I feel like you can't get away without having a Fairy type on your team as well. Next up though, we're going to look at CB Marcus and the Wishiwashi, which Wishiwashi, honestly, if this thing was only in its school form, it would be fantastic. It would be one of the best Pokemon out there. Maybe one of the, I don't know, top 40, top 50. But either way, the fact that it has really good stat distribution is obviously great. It has great move pool. Like, it gets access to both U-turn and flip turn, which is awesome. I love that. It has access to powerful moves like Earthquake, it's Facade, of course, it's Ice Beam and Liquidation. Scald is great, a Waterfall if it needs to, but honestly, you're gonna run Liquidation when you're run Waterfall. But you really don't need anything else because you have access to what you're going to be running all the time. Wishiwashi is a fantastic pivot, and I really like it as a low tier Pokemon that is just going to basically survive all the time. Look at its attacking stats, 140 each. That's crazy. Just keep it above, what is it, 25%? Yeah, above 25%, and you'll be golden. It's just a really good Pokemon overall, and I think it has a lot of utility as long as it's not in its little wimpy Wishiwashi baby form. Other than that, there is Exploud, which Exploud has, again, a ton of great things going for it. The fact that it's got access to Scrappy with Boom Burst is one of the coolest things out there because you can get through basically anything. The only thing that's going to basically resist this is going to be your Steel types and your Rock types, which again, you have access to moves like Surf, and you have access to moves like Fire Blast to deal with those things. So you have access to ways to break them down, which is obviously great. The issue with this, and always has been, is its speed stat is really not great, and overall its special attack is not the best. It could be better, obviously. I wish it was, but what are you going to do? Other than that, having an ability like Soundproof could also be really useful in certain situations to like kind of semi-wall like Pokemon like Toxtricity, which really rely on Soundproof, or Sound moves rather. So it can be really useful, and it's got a great amount of bulk, so you can really effectively run a defensive set. Or even one of my favorite sets is going to be Scarf, because even though it's got base 68 speed and you really want to run Specs or Silk Scarf on this most of the time, people don't expect Scarf Exploud all the time. That's really nice. Other than that, there is going to be Azumarill that he pointed out. Azumarill has a ton of really good sets, 3 amazing abilities in Thick, Fat, Huge Power, and Sap Sipper. Obviously, Huge Power is the best of them all. It's got really good sets like Belly Drum and like Choice Bandit sets. And one of the reasons why I like this so much is because you have a really hard time determining what is the best set against you. Having the really powerful Aqua Jet stab priority is really, really nice. Having access to both Knockoff, Play Rough, Superpower, as well as one of the really good things it gets. There's a lot of different things going for it. But one of the coolest sets that I like is more defensive with Thick Fat or with Sap Sipper, with like the Whirlpool Trapping set. Could be very scary for a team to deal with. Next up, we have Vepsis saying Azumarill. We just covered Azumarill with a Gardevoir and a Buzzwole. So let's go take a look at Gardevoir here. So Gardevoir, I've used before in the past. I like it a lot. Obviously, its abilities leave a little bit to be desired. Obviously, Trace can kind of be anything, but Gardevoir always feels to me a little bit underwhelming. But I get what he means when it's underrated, because there's a lot of things that it can do. It can be an offensive breaker with like your Fairy and your Psychic coverage, which is really good coverage, and having access to both Focus Blast, I believe it's Mystical Fire now as well, yeah. Having access to Focus Blast and Mystical Fire means that you can basically wear down pretty much any Steel type that would resist the combination of your stabs. So it's really solid there, of course, and it does get really decent support options with like Destiny Bond. It gets access to Disable as well. Encore is really nice. Healing Wish, it gets access to your screens too, which is great. There's also Teleport and Taunt, and obviously Trick Room and Trick and Wish as well. All are solid. It's just the issue that I have with Gardevoir is it doesn't always do what you want it to, and it kind of has the issue where Blaziken doesn't, where while it has the same base speed as Blaziken, Blaziken has the ability to do a bit more in terms of both being physical and special, so it can't really be taken advantage of by one wall of one type. Like a special wall won't be able to beat physical Blaziken, for example, whereas a special wall will always be able to beat the Gardevoir unless you're able to boost up, and the speed is kind of an issue because you can't just well, go Scarf and you lock in. It's not as good in my mind, or as underrated, I think, as Blaziken. Next is going to be Buzzwole. Buzzwole's picked up a lot of traction in this generation towards the end of it. It is a really bulky Pokemon that takes so many different hits from so many different things with its amazing typing at Bug and Fighting, which you think would be not great, but it's actually really good to deal with Fighting types and Ground types, and actually decently well to deal with Rock types too, because most of the moves are physical, and the fact that it's got 107 HP and 139 in its defense obviously is really good. Really a big fan of the stat distribution on this. Obviously, its special defense leaves a lot to be desired, but you can build around Buzzwole really effectively and have it be a fantastic Scarfer, have it be a fantastic Set Sweeper, have it be a fantastic defensive Pokemon. There's a lot of things going for it. I think if this Pokemon didn't get access to Roost, it'd be really bad, but with Roost, it just allows it to do a whole new different set of things, which is great. Having good coverage options, Lead Seed, the punches, having access to close combat, of course, Earthquake, a ton of really good options there is really important for the Buzzwole. The only thing is just be ready for the ridiculous air slash is going to come at you from like Pokemon like Terrakion. Next up, we have Bruno with Jirachi, Toxtricity, and Wishy-Washy. So we already covered Wishy-Washy, it's over here. And I don't believe that that Jirachi is underrated. I believe Jirachi is actually overrated. This Pokemon here, if you guys know, if you guys forget, for example, I lost a championship game in a draft league because my Jirachi missed a Thunder Wave on a Marshadow. If I hit that, it was over. There was nothing he could have done. However, I missed it, and forever Jirachi will now be known as a Pokemon that lost me a title, which I hate. But why I think it's underrated is, or overrated rather, and not underrated, is because it doesn't do enough. There are so many better steel types for what Jirachi wants to do. The one advantage it has over other steel types is a really solid pivot, but even then, you have Scizor, which pivots even better than Jirachi does. Yes, Jirachi can rely on like flinching things down with Iron Head and Zen Headbutt, but I don't think that's good enough to justify it being an underrated Pokemon. I also believe that while its coverage is solid, it just doesn't hit hard enough to be able to do the significant kind of damage you want it to do. It's unlike Mew, where Mew can kind of set up a Dragon Dance and go for a game. Jirachi really can't set up its attack. It's got to rely a lot on Calm Mind. And Calm Mind Jirachi, in my mind, is a lot less scary than something like Calm Mind Mew is, because the recovery that Jirachi relies on is Drain Punch, or it's, I believe it gets Draining Kiss, right? No, it doesn't get Draining Kiss, but it gets Wish, okay? So having access to these coverage moves and these recovery options instead of Roost or something like Recover is obviously a letdown. And if it got access to an immediate recovery move, it would be a lot better, and I think it would be underrated at that point. But it doesn't, so it is what it is. Next up is Toxtricity. I have found a new love for Toxtricity. It was one of my favorite Pokemon that was released in Pokemon Sword and Shield. However, I didn't use it, and then I used it once in CGT, and oh my god, it just hits like an absolute truck. Having what, 114? Yeah, 114 special attack is great with access to moves like Boom Burst, having Overdrive, its signature move, and then Sludge Wave, of course, being the main moves you're going to be running on this thing. With Punk Rock as well, so it means that you're going to be boosting your sound moves and reducing the damage you take from sound moves. Obviously, is really advantageous. Boom Burst hits harder than Overdrive to 2 neutral targets, which is great. And then against super effective targets, obviously it's going to be Overdrive, but against Fairy types, Boom Burst I believe does more than Sludge Wave does, if I'm not mistaken, which is still really insane. Has decent coverage for like random situations. If you want to run like a Shift Gear set with like Drain Punch, you can actually beat down something like Tyranitar, which is nice if you're running like a Shuckleberry. You'll have to deal with the Earthquake that comes your way. And it is a grounded poison type as well, which is really nice. And it's a slow pivot as well. So a lot of really good things going for the Toxtricity. Next up, we have Liv with her Scyther, T-Tar, and Electivire. Scyther, I actually posted a video on Scyther a little while back. I think that was on what, Monday, Tuesday, something like that. And Scyther just mopped the floor with me, even though I got hacked a lot at the beginning of that game. But Scyther is still really scary. The fact that it has access to both Boots or Eviolite is really good, and the fact they can Source Dance up as well with now access to dual Wing Beat and Bug Bite, there it is. Getting Technician boosts on both of these moves is amazing. Also having U-Turn, having access to Knock Off, having access to a really good wide range of coverage options is really solid. It also gets Roost as well, and its speed at base 105 is great. Its stat distribution for being a Pokemon that's a pre-evolution is really, really good, and one of the better things about this Pokemon is the fact that it's got great speed and great attack. I like this Pokemon a lot, and it can come in and just do whatever it wants against fighting types, even though it's weak, 4 times weak to Rock. Next up though is going to be Tyranitar. I've used T-Tar in the past. I've had a good time with it. The issue is I always feel like I'm regretting drafting it, but I perform well with it. And for that, I don't really know how I want to properly rate it. It is really good, don't get me wrong. I just don't think that it's necessarily overrated or underrated. I think it's actually properly rated is really the main thing with this. It's a Pokemon that has access to really wide range of coverage options. Basically any move in the game it kind of gets. It gets access to ghost moves, not ghost moves, dark moves, access to rock moves, access to ground moves, access to fire, ice, electric, all these different types of moves. And it can do a lot of work, and it can set up with Dragon Dance, which is great, or with Rock Polish. It's a great weakness policy Pokemon as well. The issue that I have with T-Tar is I wish it was just a little bit faster and had lower special attack. I think if its special attack and speed were swapped, oh my god, that would be absolutely amazing. Yes, special T-Tar would be kind of ruined, but the fact that it have 95 base speed is great, and the fact that it's 4 times weak to fighting really hurts it, and it really hurts it more because it's one of your better Pokemon you're going to be having on your team, and losing out on the ability to either reset the sand or have a really good breaker and dark type is really unfortunate, but I do like T-Tar for what it provides for a team. Other than that, she said Electivire. Electivire, I know Liv, she used to think Electivire was just absolutely terrible, but I think she has a newfound respect for it, considering she thinks it's underrated. But having Motor Drive is obviously great. That's the main thing, the main draw for it. It's an electric immunity for a Pokemon like Coco or Zeraora that's going to be coming in and firing off electric type attacks. You have a Motor Drive, what is it called? Motor Drive Electivire, which is really nice, of course. Having access to that is, again, top tier, but the reason why it fits so well is because its stat distribution with its attack, special attack, and speed are all really nice, paired with its coverage options. It gets access to moves like Psychic, gets access to moves like Ice Punch, gets access to moves like Cross Chop and other fighting moves as well, Earthquake as well, Volt Switch. There's a ton of really good options that it gets, and it can really do a lot of different things for a team. It's a really decent pivot, and having an electric immunity built in is really nice, and it's really offensive too, which can do a lot of good things. It's Pokemon I kind of regret not drafting at one point in this generation. I do think that Electivire is just a solid Pokemon overall. Next up, we're going to look at Addison. She mentions Durant, Gardevoir, and Gyarados. We're not going to cover the Gardevoir, but we're going to talk about the Durant here. Durant was a Pokemon I've used in the past before. I think Hustle Durant is really nice. Obviously, if you connect, it's going to be deadly. Having access to moves like whoops, let's keep Hustle on this. Hustle, there we go. And let's go to moves like Iron Head and X Scissor. Obviously, you get moves like First Impression for priority is really nice as well. And there's, I believe, Stomping Tantrum. Yeah, Stomping Tantrum and Stone Edge can be really good too. So you're able to break through teams really, really well. And it's decently fast at 109. It's faster than the average, a lot faster than the average in Pokemon Sword and Shield. The issue that I have with it is if you're missing your moves, then you're always going to lose a Pokemon. You're basically playing against 6 against 5, which is not great. But if you're hitting, Durant is great. Durant can do a lot of good things for a team, and it is usually ranked pretty low or tier pretty low on the tier list because people don't want to rely on a move that can be like super inaccurate, like Hustle moves. So that's really what you got to worry about there. Next up, she mentioned the Gyarados. Gyarados, I rarely see getting drafted anymore. I think if it was any lower on tier lists, it would get drafted a lot more often because it's got really good typing at water and flying, having a weakness rather to electric and to rock and to freeze dry. And I believe that's it actually. But the issue is, it also has immunity rather in ground. The issue is it doesn't do enough off the bat. Its stat distribution, while we think it'd be great, it's really not that impressive. 79 base defense is not great. Pair that with 95 base HP, which is fine. You got great special defense at 100 and great attack, but everything else is kind of like average. That's the issue here. It's got really good coverage, including Power Whip this generation, which is surprising. I don't know why this thing gets Power Whip. It makes no sense to me, but either way, it is what it is. Getting access to moves like Waterfall is what I want to say, as well as moves like Bounce still, which is great, and something like Dragon Dance can be really terrifying. Obviously, Bounce is not the best move to have, but if you need a flying move, this is the best you've really got with Gyarados. It does get moves like Earthquake though, which is nice, and of course gets other good physical or special moves like Fire moves, Ice moves, and of course something like a Thunderbolt and Thunder, one of the few water types that gets access to electric type moves. So it does have its usefulness. I do think that though, if it was lower in the tier list, it would get drafted a lot more often. One of my favorite sets for Gyarados is going to be Thunder Wave and Taunt. I love Taunt. Gyarados. I think is really, really solid here, and just defensively, it can do a lot of good things because it has Intimidate and has Moxie, just like Salamence. Next up is going to be, it's always the Swampy Boy from Jack Sluck. Now, okay, if I go to Swampert, I love Swampert. I think it is the best water ground type in the game. I don't think it's really much of an argument. Some people say it's Seismitoad. I disagree, but I think Swampert has a lot of the good things going for it. Having access to Flip Turn is really good. There's not a lot of ground types that have access to momentum moves, which is really nice because this is a Pokemon that has one weakness in grass. And if your opponent doesn't have a grass type move, and they're going to switch out into a grass type to be resisting both your water and your ground type attacks, you Flip Turn out on them, and then you're able to go into something that can break them down. I think Swampert in the right situation is just absolutely deadly and one of my absolute favorite Pokemon to see. Access to such great coverage options. Its stats are super well rounded, just like most starters are. And I think this Pokemon with a speed at base 60, unlike T-Tar, really helps it rather than hinders it. I'd rather this Pokemon have 60 base speed than the 60 base special attack and 85 base speed. That's my thoughts on that. Next up, we're going to see Josh comment the Zangoose, Vanillux, and Porygon. So I know I'll talk about Vanillux first. I know how much Josh loves Vanillux because he loves the freezing and everything like that. But if you guys don't know, Josh gets frozen very, very often. But having access to Snow Warning is great. Plus the Blizzard is obviously fantastic. Its special attack stat is not the best. It's 110, which is, it's fine, don't get me wrong, but it's not obviously insane. But having Blizzard, which is super powerful, I believe 110, yeah, 110 is 100% accurate with access to Freeze Dry. Where is it? Not Grease Dry, Freeze Dry. Is awesome, of course, and having Aurora Veil, another great thing. The issue with it is its coverage is not great. Having Flash Cannon as well as like Water Pulse are really your main options for like non-ice type attacks. And Ice is a great offensive typing, but the rest of its stats leave a lot to be desired, and it's just not as impressive that way. But it still is a solid Pokemon. I do think it is underrated though. Next up is going to be Zangoose. Zangoose is another Pokemon that should be getting drafted a lot more often, but again, it is definitely not a Pokemon that's available in Sword and Shield. The Pokemon, I'll mention just quickly, this thing, I've used it in the past in Sun and Moon, and I had a lot of fun with it because Toxic Boost is obviously fantastic. With access to Swords Dance, you're able to just rip through teams with moves like, Body Slam, Double Edge, and of course, Quick Attack. Quick Attack, there we go. Are some of the best options here. Has moves like Knockoff as well. Obviously, Sword and Shield didn't have this Pokemon available, but if you're playing in Nat Dex leagues, this is definitely a really good low-cost option for a normal type. And then, of course, he mentioned the Porygon. Now, Porygon, early in the generation, was not getting a lot of love, but it became a really good 1-point option to help deal kind of-ish with Dragapult, because Dragapult would have to go for like 2 Dragon Darts, 2 boosted Dragon Darts, they had to KO on you. So if it got the prediction wrong and went for like a Shadow Ball or something, or it wasn't a physical set, then Porygon could kind of just do whatever it wanted against it, which is obviously really advantageous. Having access to Foul Play for it and Thunder Wave was really good. Having Teleport to get out of there and get into something else on the switch in was really solid too. It picked up a lot of steam, and to the point where it got really overrated actually. So I think Porygon nowadays is overrated, but previously in the generation, it was definitely underrated. Next up, we have Jay Bear saying the Stun Fisk, which is obviously really underrated to deal with something like Tapu Koko. That's really it in my mind. I do think that as a ground type, it's fine, but as an electric type, the fact that it doesn't get access to Volt Switch is really bad. I wish this thing got Volt Switch. If it did, I think it'd be really, really good. And you know me with my momentum moves, but I think the fact that this Pokemon is so slow and has access to such decent defensive stats all around, the fact that it doesn't have Volt Switch is just a crime to me. I wish it got Volt Switch. It'd be so much better if it had that. It does get Rocks though. It's a solid rocker as a low tier rocker, and it does get access to moves like Foul Play to prevent setup, which is good, of course, and of course gets access to, where is it? Yawn. I love Yawn as well. It's just a solid type to have, solid move to have overall in certain situations. He also mentioned the Indeedee. So Indeedee depends on which set you have. The difference really is going to be it swaps the attack and defense and swaps the special attack and special defense. That's really the difference. And most of the time you're going to want to go with Indeedee male here because it's going to be a lot more offensive with 105 special attack instead of 95 special attack. There's certain situations where Indeedee female is definitely better, but in singles, Indeedee male is pretty much always going to be the go-to. You're not going to run it for Inner Focus, pretty much never. You're going to run it for Psychic Surge because you're basically getting a discount Tapu Lele, which has really, really, really good coverage options. Obviously, Expanding Force is huge. The fact that Lele doesn't get Expanding Force is obviously terrible, but it gets access to moves like Dazzling to deal with Pokemon that are going to be immune to the Psychic type attacks, like something like, I don't know, a Zoroark, whatever. It also gets moves like Hyper Voice, and even though you're going to have moves Pokemon that are going to be, we're going to have Pokemon that are going to be resisting Expanding Force, Hyper Voice, and Dazzling, that's fine because you get access to, there it is, Mystical Fire. So you're able to hit these steel types, which is amazing. One of the best things that this thing does and has access to is the fact that it is able to hit those steel types. Without that, there's a really good way to counter this, but the fact that you can run Mystical Fire means there's no really good answer for it because a Life Orb Indeedee is really strong. It's really strong, and the fact that it's so frail on the physical side and most of the priority moves are physical, this has a built-in immunity to Sucker Punch, which is huge. I like that a lot. Next up, we have Amel. Okay, Amel just basically mentioned the Pokemon he's crushed it with. So Ice Cube obviously is just fine. It's an Ice Cube. I don't think it's underrated. I think it's properly rated. It's fine. It's an Ice Cube. You can Belly Drum with it. Sure, whatever. That's all we'll say about that. Then there's going to be Pincurchin, which is, again, Pokemon that has really good abilities in Lightning Rod and Electric Surge. So Lightning Rod is good for an immunity, which is obviously nice, and Electric Surge is good as a way to support a team with that could really take advantage of opposing Pokemon. It's really not weak to opposing electric Pokemon. It doesn't matter that if they get the boost from Electric Surge as well. So I think that's really solid. If you pair with like a Hawlucha or a Hitmonlee, you can get a really low tier Unburdened Core, and that can be very scary as well. The thing with this is it doesn't get Volt Switch. Same deal as the Stunfisk. If this Pokemon got Volt Switch, it'd be great. It's gotten 15 base speed. You get slow momentum off all the time. It does get access to, I believe it's Recover, right? Yeah, I guess Recover, which is really nice here, and it gets access to other decent moves as well. Memento is not bad. Sucker Punch is decent. Having access to Thunder Wave and Toxic Spikes is great. Zing Zap, it's cool you get Zing Zap. It does not matter. You have 15 base speed. You're not flinching anything. Doesn't matter. But yeah, that's the double. That's the Pincurchin. And now moving on to the double. I spoke too soon. This Pokemon, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe he swept a team with, I think it was it Protect? Was it Swords Dance? Last Resort? And then, was it Body Press? I can't remember if it was this, but he basically swept the team with basically a Last Resort double. And that's crazy. To me, double, it doesn't make sense to me that it's so low in the tiers all the time because its stat distribution is fine. It gets the job done. It has one of the best moves in the game, one of the most interesting moves in the game in Cotton Guard, which is +3 boost. Not Iron Defense, which is +2, +3 boost. Obviously really good. Fluffy, we talked about that on Beware. Really good. Has access to Bulletproof for moves like Sludge Bomb. Really solid there as well. Has access to Steadfast, which is good for doubles, but it's just for some reason, it just never kind of got off the ground. I think the reason for that is its coverage is just not that good. That's really the main reason why. Has access to wild charges and headbutt, has access to body press and body slam, but where is Earthquake? Earthquake would be so good on this Pokemon here, I think, but hey, it is what it is. Again, stat fusion, fine. It should not be this fast. It should not be 88 base speed. It really just should not. Moving on is Joe to Flaming, Talon Master J with the Sandaconda. Sand Spit's a unique ability. If you want to run Sand and you don't want to run T-Tar, I mean, you got Sandaconda, I guess, but I just think that it's missing a good bit. Its defense is great, obviously, but it's missing a bit in terms of the rest of its stats. I find they're just not as good. It has access to a really unique way to set up, which is going to be with Coil and Rest with Shed Skin, which can be annoying, and having Body Press for that is great. But I think that there's just so many better ground types available than Sandaconda that you really don't want to rely on that Pokemon as being your main ground in a matchup. It just shouldn't be that Pokemon. There's just better options. That's really why. But I guess because that you could say it's underrated. So yeah. Next up is going to be Gravy. Of course, Greedent. Yeah, makes sense. So we'll talk about Greedent. We'll talk about Jolteon. We'll talk about Diancie. So there is the Greedent. Cheekpelt Greedent with the, I think it was Citrus Berry is what is usually run. This Pokemon can just take hits for days. It's super, super fat. It's a really good answer to Dragapult, actually, unironically, because it acts the Citrus Berry with Cheek Pouch. It's an immunity to the Ghost type attacks. And because it's so physically defensive with 120 HP and 95 defense, it's a decent answer to something like the Dragon Darts. The issue is it's not consistent at doing it. That's the problem, really. It has good coverage too, and Belly Drum as well. Belly Drum Greedent can do a lot of work, especially if you're in Trick Room, because it has 20 base speed. So yeah, Greedent is solid. Jolteon, I think Jolteon is terrible. I don't think it is underrated. I think it is properly rated as being a bad Pokemon. This Pokemon, it was great in previous generations as a good like mid-tier Pokemon. The issue was it relied on Hidden Power Ice so much, or Hidden Power Grass so much. It doesn't get that anymore. It has access to Thunderbolt and Discharge, and basically that's it. I believe it's Shadow Ball as well now. Yeah, Shadow Ball is here, Store Power here, Volt Switch, sure, but that's really it. It just, there's not enough for it. If you really need a Pokemon that's going to be fast and you need to fill that speed tier, sure. If you need a Pokemon that's just an electric immunity, sure. I just don't think the rest of it makes any sense to run something like Jolteon anymore. At least not in Generation 8, and we'll see if it gets access to moves in Generation 9 that'll be worth its while. Next up is going to be the Diancie. So Diancie is over here with the Clear Body, having access to nowadays Mystical Fire and Baton Pass. Where is it? Baton Pass. These are two of the new big changes to Diancie. Mystical Fire for the Steel types is really nice. To catch them on the switch is great. Having Baton Pass to switch out is obviously awesome. Having access to what is it called? To Stealth Rocks is great. The fact you have Clear Body means your Baton Pass are never going to be negative stats, but the biggest advantage to it is still Diamond Storm. Diamond Storm is such a phenomenal move. Yes, it has a chance to miss. It's 95 base accuracy, but it has a 50% chance 50% chance to boost your defense by 2, doubling your defense stat, which can be absolutely insane if your opponent does not have a good Steel type option to hit you with, which can be really, really scary. It also gets access to Draining Kiss. Draining Kiss, my favorite set is running Draining Kiss with Calm Mind. This basically this set here is really, really, really good, and you have ways to break down your opponent's team really well with a Pokemon like this. It's just got really good coverage options. I like Diancie a lot. Next up is going to be JBM Pokemon with a Toxtricity. We talked about Toxtricity already, mentioning that knocking out Lando T with Specs Boom Burst is just amazing. Yeah, I get it. If you catch a Lando T on Switch and then go for Boom Burst, it's gone. The issue is nowadays everyone's gonna know that Boom Burst is coming out, and it's not gonna be Overdrive or Sludge Wave, so you're gonna lose. You're not gonna do that. They're not gonna go into that. They're gonna go into like a Ghost type. They're gonna go into a Steel type instead of going into a Lando T. That's the real issue there, but it is still definitely an underrated Pokemon in my mind. Next up, Nashoba with the Salamence. We spoke about Salamence already. Followed up by a Raikou. I love me some Raikou. I think Raikou is fantastic. It has really good special attack at 115, great speed 115 as well. Raikou is just a much better Jolteon. I remember in previous generations, people were saying Jolteon is better than Raikou, even though Jolteon had a bit more speed, a little bit slower special attack, and obviously worse defensive stats. But I think what Raikou does in this generation really better than anything else, better than a lot of Pokemon, is unfortunately it's going to be Sub, Toxic, Protect. This is a really, really good Raikou set because of pressure as well. It forces a lot of stalling on your opponent's team. It puts yourself into a really good position. And while you may be losing your Raikou, you still get to keep it with like Volt Switch. So you get to pivot around a lot. You also get access to Scald this generation. So this is not AX, there we go, Scald. This is one of the few Pokemon, the few electric Pokemon that was really unaffected by the reduction or the loss of Hidden Power Ice. Obviously, you'd rather have Hidden Power Ice for something like Garchomp or Lando T, but Scald is still a suitable alternative that gets the job done. Which again, I think the losing Hidden Power was healthy for the game. If you guys want to see a video on me discussing Hidden Power and why I think it was a good thing that it left, let me know down in the comments as well. Of course, also I should remind you, leave a like on the video because we're nearing the end of it. So leave a like, subscribe as well, all that good stuff. And let's go ahead and continue. I think that what it does really well, again, is the subsets. It can just support a team really well. It forces a lot of prep, and it can just do a lot of setup and shenanigans, and it can just be a really good momentum gainer for you, a really good pivot for a team with access to Volt Switch as well. Other than that, you mentioned Rhyperior. So Rhyperior, I really want to draft Rhyperior once in this generation, and I did it, and I had a good time with it. The issue is, because it has 4 times weaknesses to grass and to water, that really hurts. And Scald is one of the most common moves in the game, which is obviously a water type move that also has the additional punish of burning you, which sucks. And then Grass Knot, a lot of Pokemon get Grass Knot, and against Rhyperior, it's 120 base power. Yes, it gets access to Solid Rock to kind of reduce that damage output, but it's obviously not what you want to be dealing with. So I feel like there's better options to go with for ground types, but it is definitely a suitable option. I think it's just fine. It's a solid Pokemon overall. I just don't think there's anything crazy about it that makes it stand out more than anything else, really. It gets access to Rock Polish, but that doesn't matter because you have 40 base speed. So that's fine, but its coverage is also great. That's a really good thing as well. In certain situations, Rhyperior can be really hard to take down, and it can just break things while it's being taken down. I just don't think it has good longevity, which is one of the reasons why I'm not as big of a fan of it as some other people. Then we have the final reply on this part of the thread: Conkeldurr, Gardevoir, and Qwilfish from Ephelon. So we already mentioned Gardevoir. We'll talk about Qwilfish first, because I love Qwilfish. I think Qwilfish is super underrated. Having Intimidate as an ability is great. Also, having access to Spikes and Toxic Spikes. Whoops, Toxic Spikes. Toxic, there we go. Is amazing. It has access to Thunder Wave, and it's a fast taunter as well with 85 base speed. Its stats really are not great. 55 speed def with 65 HP is not a recipe for success, but I like its typing a lot. It's the same typing as Toxapex, and while you do have weaknesses to something like Freeze Dry, to electric moves, to psychic moves, and of course the ground moves, you're able to handle them effectively with the rest of your team, because there is obviously ground immunities that are built into rosters. Most teams have an electric immunity as well, and most teams have a psychic immunity as well. So you can pair those 3 Pokemon, those 3 types that Qwilfish is weak to, and get immunities to each and every one of them, which obviously could lead to good things for a team. And one of my favorite sets to run on Qwilfish is actually going to be an offensive set. It's really good offensively with like Gunk Shot, has access to Waterfall as well, Liquidation too, I believe. Yeah, this is one of the Pokemon that does get Liquidation, and I do like Qwilfish offensively as well, but I do prefer the what is it called, the defensive set more so. I don't know if it's underrated, but I do think that it is a good Pokemon, absolutely. I think people always end up driving this Pokemon because it's just a solid Pokemon overall. And then we have Conkeldurr. Okay, there is a league where I used Conkeldurr. I think I went 1 kill and 8 deaths or something, but Conkeldurr was amazing for me. It was really, really good because it just broke through a team. The issue is it just couldn't finish the job. I think that Conkeldurr, what it provides for a team, is a great status absorber. It now actually gets defog. Yay, defog Conkeldurr. I don't know why this thing gets defog, but whatever. I think we've been asking that question for 3 years now. It has solid coverage overall, close combat and drain punch, all the elemental punches, having access to Poison Jab as well for those fairy types, having access to Earthquake, really solid here. A ton of really good things, but the main draw to it is going to be the Facade. Oh, nope, not Face, Facade. And that with the Flame Orb is a really, really strong set to run on Conkeldurr. Obviously, its speed is terrible, but its attack stat at 140 with priority Mach Punch is amazing, and you're able to just break through teams really well with Conkeldurr. The issue is in certain spots, if you're going to be up against Psychic type, you might just lose before it has a chance to knock off the Psychic type Pokemon. So yeah, that's going to be it for this section here. I know I spoke briefly. I retweeted it a few times, so I have a couple of different discussions. So we have over here, there we go. So we have Galarapidash from Sandy Sims. So Galarapidash is obviously a Pokemon that I don't think is actually used very often at all. It has access to a decent, oops, not Gallade, Rapidash, Galar, there we go. It has decent speed at 105, and it's got decent coverage options. It's got access to like Mega Horn. It's got access to its stab options in like Play Rough, and with, I think it's like, is it Zen Headbutts? Yeah, Zen Headbutt it gets as well. I think it also gets Psycho Cut. Yeah, Psycho Cut it gets too. But the main thing is it gets Mystical Fire, and I believe it gets High Horsepower too. High Horsepower, there you go. So it has 2 ways, physical and special, to break through steel types, and Special Rapidash, unironically, is actually a bit better than Physical Rapidash in my mind. Its typing is fine, same as Gardevoir, a bit faster. It doesn't do enough. It doesn't hit as hard as Gardevoir, and that's why I think it's lower on the ranking than Gardevoir. It also does a little bit less. It has some utility in doubles because of Pastel Veil, which would be nice, but its abilities are basically useless in singles. So yeah, it makes it really tough to justify getting a Galarapidash on your team unless you need a speed tier, you need a Psychic type, or you need a Fairy type, and you don't want to use something like a Diancie or whatever. So that's going to be the Galarapidash. Then Marcus mentions again with Urshifu, Dragon Bolt, and Mew. No. These Pokemon are not good. He's saying that, I remember seeing this. He said they're so underrated that Champions of Galar, the CGT, forgot to put Dragon Bolt and Urshifu into the draft pool, which is kind of true because we decided not to let those Pokemon in. And yeah, also I believe the finals for CGT are going to be going up next week. So make sure you come back not come back here, but make sure to check that out. Join the CGT server. I'll try and link it in the description below or in the comments. So yeah, that is the Galar Rapidash, and then one more Sandy Sims mentioned again, the Cursula over here. So I don't think Cursula is good at all. I think Cursula was super highly rated earlier in the generation, as well as Galar Corsola. The issue is it's got shit defense. If its attack and defense were swapped, like, you got a bulky ass Pokemon, it's gonna take hits for days. It has access to Pain Split, I believe, not Pain Split, what's it called? Strength Sap. There we go. To be able to recover back HP, which is great. Has access to really good special attack. 145 special attack is crazy with Shadow Ball, is amazing. Can do a lot of things. Got access to Giga Drain, and Earth Power, of course, to break through things. Has access to moves like a Power Gem as well for those flying types that might be coming around. Could be nice. And Will-O-Wisp, of course, could be great. The one thing I wish it had, other than the swap of its attack and defense, is Trick Room. If this thing got Trick Room and set it for itself, that'd be fantastic. I would love that. Weak armor makes some sense in certain situations. The issue is because you only got 30 base speed, you're not gonna outspeed anything at +2 anyways. So whatever. But guys, that's going to be it. That is it for the underrated Pokemon that you guys mentioned to me in the Twitter thread here. If you guys want to see more Twitter threads, let me know down in the comments below. I will be calling it over here. If you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like on the video. We're trying to reach 50 likes on the video as I smacked my mic. I'm so sorry about that. And we will go ahead and end the video off here. Leave a like, comment, subscribe to all that good stuff, and I will see you guys all next time.